And so OpenAI did a ChatGPT for business update. Generally, their capabilities in these business plans or enterprise plans or even the API, they slowly trickle into more general public release. And I think there were two key things, at least for me, that came out of this release. One, which I think is massive, and I'm not going to understate that, is ChatGPT Record, which allows you to record directly and speak voice notes, meetings, and then use the power of ChatGPT to transcribe, but then analyze, summarize those meetings. The second was the connectors into company knowledge and then custom connections through the MCP. So I'll split those into three. So much comes at you at once, you can almost miss how impactful each one of these is. I wanted to first start with ChatGPT Record. This is a space that I'm deeply passionate about. I've spent more than 6+ years building a company in this space. Before that, thinking about this constantly, conceptualizing this. And from an early stage in my career, understanding the power of voice as an interaction method, also a self-learning method, and a store of knowledge, a database of knowledge that is so crucial to who we are, both personally and then as business owners. And when I first started Speak AI, one of the things that I was really trying to figure out, first of all, was seeing this gap in Evernote where I couldn't use voice. I was documenting all these notes, all these journal pieces, especially going through a difficult period in my life. I wanted to be able to record voice notes and then add that to that knowledge base in Evernote. I then wanted to be able to analyze that data. I wanted to be able to understand what I was putting in there on a more high-level basis at different periods, different weeks, different days, time of days, years. I wanted to use that data to understand myself better, maybe even predict things about myself. So I started building the scaffolding of that through Speak AI to take those voice notes, to take my text notes, my written journals, compile that all together into a knowledge base, and then understand myself better. And that's led to a 6+ year long journey to build that technology and then see people who are interested in it. I've seen that business grow. I've worked with individuals at school who are doing research all the way up to Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies. And I've learned a lot about this space, and I've seen the transformation, even the work that was required to build custom sentiment models and named entity recognition to extract keywords and phrases, all these things to try to turn conversations into insights, to make use of this data, fundamentally knowing that voice was such a huge part of that. And then, of course, what we do with voice as people is communicate. We have meetings. And so there's this incredible database or the source of information where meaningful things happen, meaningful information is shared, decisions are made within an organization. And when I started that, I felt early in that assessment, early in that idea, as well as early in understanding that there was technology now available to complete this task. The transcription required, the data visualization required, AI models that could do this sentiment analysis, do this keyword extraction. And so I started building that company, and I wasn't the only one. You had companies like Otter start early in this and really build some incredible speech recognition with amazing intuitiveness, especially in their mobile applications, and then highly accurate speaker identification, which was really a game changer also, along with the amount of access they gave you, even as a free user. They've changed their plans to ratchet up and become the business to break that 100 million ARR barrier. But they operated in that same space, these meetings, these voice notes. They had so much valuable information in them, and this continued to grow. We had Fireflies. You'll start to see a pattern here. They all say the number one. Fireflies comes in. And then you've got TLDV, you've got Granola, you've got Fathom. Then you had more vertical specific ones, things like Chorus AI, which was bought by ZoomInfo, one of the famous ones, Gong. But really all of them did a similar thing. Have a meeting bot, a meeting assistant, join the meeting, record the call, identify the speakers, transcribe the call, summarize it. Ideally, pass that information into a CRM like HubSpot or Salesforce. and you've automated the note taking, you've automated the form filling, you've automated the CRM record updates, and it's a beautiful thing and it's a beautiful function. I think two things of interest here. One, it's been highly commoditized, and I could look on Google right now and type AI meeting assistant, and you will see dozens, hundreds of them, and more popping up every day. And when I jump on a call with a lead or a customer, there's another one that they're introducing to me that I've never seen before, and I can look, and there's one person on LinkedIn and the landing page just gone up. So they're multiplying at a high speed because the technology is now so accessible and it's so obvious of a problem. And one other interesting point, there's really a company behind all of this, company called Recall AI, the universal API for meeting bots. And almost all of the companies, if we take a look at these logos, are using Recall for their meeting bots. They've built that infrastructure, and I think they're making a killing off it. They're over 10 million a year in revenue and just a small team, but they found that spot of building the infrastructure versus being the actual meeting assistant itself. And in my time building this technology, I've seen a lot of churn and burn. I've seen companies fail. I've seen companies merge. I've seen them become just really shells of what they were. And ChatGPT Record, I think, is going to have a continued impact on this space, and maybe at an even more accelerated pace than what we've seen before. I think there's one other interesting note here, is this difference between how teams are doing this. The original version that most people were used to was the meeting assistant joining the call, just like we have in this image here. You can see, got my dog there, and then the AI assistant is in the call, and it's joined by our team members. You can see it on the call. There was some customization and naming and everything you could do, but it was that thing joining the call. And there was a lot of pushback against the meeting assistant being in the call, especially at the beginning. I don't want to record the call. I don't know what you're going to do with this information. What if I say something I want to take back? What if there's something that's not in compliance? What if there's security or breach? There's a data leak. So many concerns about this. I do think a lot of those have gone away just because it's become so omnipresent. But still, movement has been made to address this. And so then you see companies like Granola, who are much more focused on not having the bot join the call and you're just recording your device. Now, what's interesting about this is there are laws against recording meetings without people's consent, especially in specific states and countries. And so the truth is, without the bot being there, you could easily have your call recorded and not be aware of it. So I do think there is this interesting detriment to all of this innovation that's been made to try to reduce friction, but then also maybe encroach on people's privacy and their expectations of private calls when they might not be private. But either way, OpenAI comes out with ChatGPT Record. And let's take a look at some of what they're talking about in this video. We'll watch this here together. So I think it's compelling and interesting, and I'll stop if there's any points that are worthwhile.
Just really half the story, right? A lot of the important decisions and context from our work happens in the conversations that we have with our teammates.
Absolutely.
And so that's why we're introducing ChatGPT Record mode. It's a way for us to help make sure that your notes are complete, that they're not scattered. You're also not having to just multitask during a meeting.
So first of all, that was the pitch that I remember using when I first started and showed people Speak AI. And it was a problem I felt just being in a call, wanting to pay attention, but then furiously wanting to write notes. And so I'd either have good notes or I'd have a good conversation. I felt like that's the way it was going. And so the AI meeting assistant was a huge win considering the space that we were in previously. I think what's interesting here is OpenAI can directly lift messaging from companies like mine, like Fireflies, like Otter, who had built up the infrastructure originally, and then obviously the messaging, and then built and reflected that value proposition, that understood the pain points over time. And so it's very easy for OpenAI to just adopt that messaging. And then what we saw very quickly is once OpenAI really came out and GPT became more accessible, that technology was adopted very quickly. We were one of the first teams at Speak AI to bring large language models into our system, and it gave us massive benefits, obviously with the summarization, but we were really focused on every meeting or interview or focus group as a data set that you wanted to mine for insights. And instead of using the keyword extraction, the sentiment models, these very static models that we had built, we could then use the large language models and contort them in different ways and even take unstructured information and push it to very specific fields for more quantitative analysis that then we could visualize and do things with speak. So it's very interesting to hear them just be able to lift that messaging, and with one small release and a little button within the platform, which we'll show here, how much weight they have behind that, especially as they move towards 1 billion active users in the platform itself.
With record mode, what we're introducing is on our macOS desktop app, you will see a circle button next to all of the other voice options.
Notice that it says MacBook in the desktop application. This is how they got native recording permission to be able to do some of the capabilities they're going to show in this video.
And with just clicking on this button, you will get a recording. So right now, ChatGPT is recording all of our audio, and on the back end, it's transcribing that audio, and it's going to generate a really useful summary for me afterward.
So very clean, minimal interface. I think that's a powerful thing, especially when you've got the application open.
So for now, we're not going to record this session, so I'm going to go ahead and just close this out. But let's look at AGI Corp's Q3 Pounce plan. So the team last week was doing a brainstorming session around personality-aware translation, and they were really talking through like the different options that they had. And they recorded that session, so you can see that there is a structured meeting output here.
So this is what a lot of companies are now doing. They're taking their transcript, like Speak AI, Fireflies, Otter. Otter may have their own model, but most of these companies do not. Take that data, feed it to the large language models, whether it's OpenAI or Anthropic or even Gemini. This was previously a really difficult task because you have to send it in these small little chunks, and the context length wasn't good enough. And so this was not an easy thing to do, and there was a value proposition there. But then you can use that data to then format it, and you get the summary. Now, the summary here looks no different than what a lot of these teams have spent a lot of time doing. You can see the summary, you've got the key points, you've got timestamps in there, and I think they've gone a little deeper into this, and they've put some weight on this release and this development because they do need to compete with the status quo that is already there, where people expect these references, these timestamps, these moments, so that they can listen back or use that as evidence or just remind themselves of exactly what happened beyond the summarized point.
You'll see is that there are key points, action items, and most importantly, they're always citing the transcript. So if I have more questions about, hey, the energy trait, that's where we're going to focus our personality translation on. What was spoken about that? What should I know about that? It's going to go highlight that section exactly in the transcript.
So I think this was one of those key functions, something that we spent a lot of time on Speak here, and we use this method called embeddings and then references to then show you the exact moments of what has been said. And I think this is where we can see deeper functionality emerge in some of these systems. With Speak, for example, you can click to that exact moment, listen to the audio, or view the video back. Whereas here, at least in the current preview, you're seeing really just the transcript, and I don't even believe playback of the audio or video itself.
So you always have that full context.
These timestamps are awesome. It makes it really easy to figure out where exactly the things were said.
It's hilarious how these guys are super smart, but they've really dumbed down the messaging here and are introducing this to an entirely new audience who didn't necessarily come to ChatGPT for this in the first place. And so many of us who spent time in this space have refined this messaging and moved up-leveled the problem statements because we've had to, especially because the space is competitive, where these guys have such a huge distribution moat and are really educating consumers that they're bringing that language down to the simple levels and focus on, oh, wow, timestamp and transcript. And it's just a really interesting dynamic that I'm seeing play out in this video.
It's being able to go from the summary to the transcript is really powerful. So if I were in a meeting and I were going to share something back with Sandra and she didn't have full context, she's able to get the kind of TLDR in the summary, but then also go to the individual details when she needs to.
TLDR, literally the company that we were looking at before, TLDV, I'm sure they didn't like that.
Yep, exactly. The great thing too is, let's say like we fast forward a couple of weeks and I'm trying to remember what happened in that meeting. And this happens all the time. Things move fast at OpenAI, and so I imagine they move fast at AGI Corp as well. And let's say I was saying, hey, what were the technical limitations that we discussed at our Q3 planning?
And so another interesting point beyond the individual meetings was I don't want to just look at one call. I want to look across many, or I want to be able to query and interact with the data in natural language and be able to dive deeper back into calls that were previously made. Now, I think what's really interesting here is that this is less used than people think. Meetings are almost in a way like TikTok. You use them, you like them in the moment, and then you forget about them, and there's some fragments of information. I think there are specific use cases where it is valuable, but I expect this to be less adopted than they might think, just through the pattern of usage that we've seen, and that really a lot of these meeting databases become just that, a database that sits there as storage, but is not maybe used in the most practical way, especially beyond the expectations that people had when they first started using the product. Now, ways teams have gone beyond that, and here at Speak, we've really focused on more the deeper analysis of a data set, customization of data extraction and visualization. So think, okay, I did a bunch of focus groups and interviews. What themes came out of that? And out of those themes, which ones were the most popular? What was the density of that in the data set? And how did that change over time? That's where you can start to go if you're doing more research or customer feedback or product research. Whereas a general meeting, you're more maybe doing a surface level query. I think the use case that it is interesting in is obviously sales, where maybe you're reconnecting with the client and you want to summarize multiple calls, the stage that you're at, what to do in this meeting, how to move to the next step. And I know already that OpenAI is building this sales agent that they're previewing privately. And so I expect that while they might not be able to go as deep as Gong and Chorus right away, that is a movement that they're taking, and we'll see that come out in this sort of foundational release.
ChatGPT is going to scan across all of the data sources, again, docs, data sources, but also our transcripts. They're included in that overall corpus as well. And so you can see, hey, what we flagged was the latency issues, the GPU resource constraints.
I think the powerful piece of this, two things, I guess. One is the multimodality, audio, video, text information, CSVs. It can sift through all of that highly intelligently to give you an answer. And a lot of these systems, Fireflies, Otter, for example, Otter really only processes audio. You can upload a video, but it strips that out. That's one of the ways that they've streamlined their processing. But then you can't store PDFs. You can't support text documents in there. And so you lack a fundamental source of knowledge that OpenAI can handle. So I will say that's a plus for OpenAI, this deep multimodality. And I think it's something that we got wrong at Speak AI, because when we started, transcription models, voice analysis, vision, computer vision were very separate things. And although it seemed like it's possible that they could maybe be joined all at once into intuitive models at that time, it wasn't clear. And it felt like the direction we were heading in was more these separate models for different modalities. And obviously that's been proven wrong with these releases, especially the voice mode that we're seeing within ChatGPT and the vision analysis and the OCR type of work that it can do, as well as then you've got Gemini with some really beautiful multimodality and how it understands even YouTube videos and things like that. I think the second part of it is memory. OpenAI's memory capabilities, I believe, far exceed any of the platforms here today that are building more of these meeting note takers. And because they have other instructions that you've given them, other context about who you are, you've maybe been asking them all these different queries, the way that it can surface answers for you or what it prioritizes in its search is so powerful. And I think that is one of the killer functions truly of OpenAI is memory and how it will come into play with ChatGPT Record. I think one last, if I'm just a rapid prototype, a third point is what I'm terming and what we're looking at Speak AI is this idea of AI meta awareness, where you can say Q3 planning and it can understand its own date. It can understand when those meetings were recorded, when those documents were recorded. And so even if you say something like this week, that meta awareness of the documents and the data and the information within the system is very powerful and allows you to generate insights or summaries without having to use all these filters and all these functions that previously felt like that was the only way to isolate and get to that information.
And with it, you have all of these embedded links directly into the transcript. So again, you can have that full context. And then from here, what's really great is I might ask, okay, help me draft a leadership update on our Q3 roadmap. We definitely don't look far enough
Get
for
to Q4.
So just like that, something that would have taken me a lot of pinging folks, trying to get the full context of the meeting, those other teammates trying to remember what happened in the meeting, all of that's captured, and ChatGPT becomes your second memory, right? And so with that, I'm able to both recall, understand clarity on what the decisions were made, and then immediately turn that out into a leadership update that normally would have taken me a bunch of time.
So a few things here is this is something that we've seen directly users doing within our application, taking a meeting and then turning that into a draft of an email. Companies like I'd say Read AI have gone even further where they've integrated Gmail, Outlook directly into the platform and allowed you to send that meeting. Read hasn't done the full integration. I saw them still copying and pasting, but that's the state that we're moving towards. And I think OpenAI, and as they talk about these other releases, these knowledge connectors, and then MCP has even more capability to take this draft that they just created here and push that immediately. Because I think that disconnection between applications, especially in the meeting note taker domain, is one of the gaps in the space. And I've seen especially Fireflies build so many integrations. It's extraordinary because that horizontal use case requires so many different platforms. There's the sort of sales focused CRM ones like that, but then there's the email and the more sendability or action taking things. And then you've got form filling. And then obviously you've got just APIs and Zapier integration so people can configure their own flows and whatever they're trying to do there.
So with that, Neil, show us what Deep Research is up to.
So that was it on ChatGPT Record. Pretty quick little demo there, but it sent shockwaves through people building in this space very quickly. I thought this was a great post. I didn't know this guy, but popped up in my feed about how this is not just another feature, it's foundational. General purpose LLMs are becoming the operating system for work. And there's just so much information that teams are now putting into ChatGPT that if they can build a serviceable enough function here, some of the platforms that are spending so much time and resources in this space may not be able to compete anymore or be that value proposition for an entirely separated system that cost money still, some of them very expensive or per usage pricing that adds up very quickly, especially if you have a big team doing calls and doing all these meetings, and just speaks to the speed that a company on a momentum swing like this is able to get on, especially with the resources, the technical talent behind them, then just the data centers and compute. It's truly incredible. You've also got guys like Jason from SaaStr, very credible voice, talking about this idea that ChatGPT, it didn't seem like it could become this mega SaaS app, but moments like this with ChatGPT Record, and he also highlights the MCP and the deep research abilities with the knowledge connectors, it starts to change that narrative and really what people think is possible from an AI company, especially with the reach that OpenAI has. Then a lot of talk about companies in this space like Granola, some trying to, I think, defend them and say it's more of a social company. And I remember first showing this to people and them being in awe in 2019 to just a sense of pure commoditization, no moat. Other companies that didn't have this, like Notion integrating it, and then now OpenAI, and then Google Meet and Microsoft Teams. As people saw this use case grow, the value there accumulate, was obvious for them to enter such a natural space, especially Google and Microsoft and Amazon, many of them who had so many of these foundational technology layers that all of these companies were using. And then you've got people who are spending time taking looks at where voice, and she's focused specifically on voice agents, but where is voice working? And of course, we've got these big enterprise call centers. We've got a lot of small businesses receiving calls. And then where I've spent a lot of my time more has been coaching and training and then research and interviews. And I can say that there's still problems in the space with accuracy and how you manage that data and just adoption from teams. There's been huge progress since we started in 2019. Everything from speed, accuracy, cost, to how you can manipulate the information and get what you want, and how you can search through those entire databases. It really is a fundamental improvement from where we started. And that vision that I had in 2019 has come. It's truly here. And there's not many things blocking it from getting even better. And of course, one of the things I talk a lot about is this multimodality. And something I wonder here for OpenAI is the analysis that they're doing on that summarization. Is it only on the transcript itself, or are they analyzing the vocal tonality, the delivery? If you asked about how confident was someone in, is it just based on the transcript, or is it based on how they said it? Or is it also including the visual stimuli? Is it including, did the person look nervous on the call? Are they fidgeting? All these things. And so that multimodality, that other layer of analysis is really powerful. And again, a lot of companies in these separate modalities, but if OpenAI can combine these together, or Google can combine these together, those models, those companies will also be encroached upon. And we've seen a continued pattern of this granola getting Sherlocked by OpenAI, and we saw the Anthropic Windsurf battle over Claude, especially after OpenAI's purchase of Windsurf. Really does show the power of these foundational AI companies and the role they can play in creating, shaping a market, and then modifying that market depending on how they want to participate in it. And then people who are excited about this, meeting notes in ChatGPT directly. It's a leader of indication of action to happen within an organization, and it's very powerful. And when you combine that with some of the other releases, the integrations, it's really powerful combination that they've been able to pack into this release. As mentioned, 500 million plus ChatGPT users that they're going to be able to reach. How quickly this technology can be adopted as they see that little icon show up in the bottom corner is pretty mind-blowing. And it begs a question for me, which is, does this expand the business for companies in this space, the meeting note takers, because they start to interact with ChatGPT? And do they have that moment where it's good enough? Or do they say, okay, this is good, but I want to do this. I can't do this. And so then they start to look for alternatives. And then what is OpenAI's initiative here? What do they truly want to accomplish? Are they going to then say, okay, we're seeing this churn, or we're getting this feedback, we want to continuously iterate on this, and this is a top priority at the organization, versus another feature that we've added? And I think this is where companies often would come and try to compete. They'd say, hey, there's this small missing component that is extremely valuable and difficult, so let's focus on that. Or this very deep vertical that we want to go into, so let's focus on that. And these were these edge cases that could develop and allow you to develop a business and a market that then sometimes would be much bigger than what you thought. And then, as always, you've got the messaging around OpenAI killed all meeting note-taking AI apps, RIP Fireflies, Zoom's meeting assistant, TLDV, RIP Speak AI, RIP Otter AI. And so that narrative, of course, always comes to light. And I think in a way, this can be both true and wrong, but I will say more than ever, and this was a mistake I've made for a long time, this horizontal functionality and business model is not going to be sufficient, especially when you're going up against companies like OpenAI. I thought when I started Speak AI that we could almost be like the Zapier for voice data, where we were this configurable workflow that you could automate all these different things, and that customizability was a super valuable component of it. But we've seen companies who have gone deeper into these verticals accelerate much more quickly, and then also build that end-to-end value proposition and then workflow really made to automate those painful problems those companies and customers are facing, and have that sort of magical value proposition come to life. And so you go vertical like Gong, and you can see what's so interesting. We used to call these meeting assistants. Everyone's now calling them meeting agents. I got blue shining on my face. Purple? I'm colorblind. And so you can go vertical into things like sales. Another great example was Dovetail, which went deep into customer knowledge and customer feedback. Really what I've seen most meeting assistant teams do is have to make that vertical choice. Many of them choose to go with sales because it's closest to ROI, close to being an essential, especially in this time where the market is volatile and all this macroeconomic stuff is going on. And you can see they're going exclusive offer for Gong customers. Get it free through the end of the Gong contract. So vicious competition going on in this space here. Or, and I watched this live, you can be like Otter AI. Here's Sam Liang, incredible CEO, founder, entrepreneur, who got to 100 million ARR with probably one of the best meeting assistants in the market, and is now looking at AR avatars to handle the meetings itself. So going beyond assistants, going beyond agents, but having an avatar who is you run those calls for you. And so that's the futuristic view that they're now taking, that bridge that they want to gap with their messaging and with their product, because they know the space is in danger, especially as OpenAI and Microsoft and Google all enter it aggressively. And then you have, whether it's a reframe of functionality that was already done, or it's truly they're building more agentic behavior, the other path I'm seeing companies take is the agent, where they're taking a bunch of functions and calling them agents and allowing you to run them now. Unfortunately, what I see here is a lot of them are built on OpenAI and are, in a way, bolt-ons from the original product that I would say OpenAI is doing better. And so if OpenAI can get the meeting recording and then maybe the speaker identification and the video audio playback, some of these killer functionalities like video clipping and the audio clipping that Speak AI, our company, and Fireflies has, then the other pieces will begin to take over. And we see companies like TLDV who obviously have huge incentives to test this product and try to give feedback, their reviews, and respond to this release because of the narrative that's emerging that these companies are maybe no longer as valuable as they were, or maybe no longer even required. But you can see that they're very quick to do this. The function comes out immediately. They're putting together this article. And I think TLDV makes some great points here. There's limits up to 120 minutes per session. Here at Speak AI, we process 9-hour files. The audio is deleted right away, which is not ideal in most cases. It's only in ChatGPT desktop app and only for team workspaces at launch. Coming soon is there, but coming soon can mean a lot of things. There's no video, there's no speaker diarization, identifying speakers and who's switching between who, although Whisper itself is an incredibly proficient transcription model. The question is OpenAI prioritizing this? And if they will, and they are, a lot of these challenges that TLDV is describing here may be eliminated very quickly, and these arguments might not be able to stand strong anymore. TLDV fairly admits some of the good things, the quick wins, instant text output, the real-time sessions with live transcription. Live transcription is great, although also becomes sometimes a distraction in a call. Obviously, the natural language that you can interact with ChatGPT, and then the connection with other document types and other connectors that you're having. A few problem statements they point out, I think these are fair. No bot joins, so you have to remember to record, versus the automation when you sync your calendar in platforms like Speak AI. The live transcript is there, but there's no speaker tag, so it all just merges together. There's zero video or audio to identify if there's any hallucinations happening. The audio and video is deleted directly after, at least claims so. And you can lose some very powerful information there. And I see a lot of people watching back the video or listening to the audio once they upload files and meetings and focus groups and interviews into Speak. On larger queries around search, there was no video and audio to do that double check, those references that Speak AI has. And collaboration outside the team's workspace, non-existent, at least for now. And so they break this down even further. It's a great article by TLDV on this. They obviously put a lot of thought and emphasis into this. But what good assistants add on top? One is they record the meeting automatically so that you don't have to remember to press that button. And they're saying, why isn't it ready for business? Why isn't ChatGPT Record ready for business? There's data silos and personal context. So depending on how you're using the platform, maybe your personal life is joined together with the meetings that you're having. And if you want to segregate that, you don't have as much choice. Now you do have folders in ChatGPT, but you don't have that same segregation that is possible in some of the systems like TLDV, like Speak AI. There's no explicit GDPR flow. So the consent, again, that idea that you have to inform someone that they're being recorded is not there. And we've already seen these court cases where OpenAI is being told to store all the data even after deletion. So there's some things that might need to be addressed there. There's text only, which means there's no source of truth. The LLMs hallucinate. We still know that. You can see it in action. You don't have those timestamps, at least right now. And it's important to keep the full recording like TLDV does, Speak AI does. There's no speaker recognition. So if you don't know who said they're going to do what or when, and there's no separation and identification of those speakers, that context can be jumbled up. Action items can be assigned to the wrong person. And there can be a lot of gaps in the accuracy of that analysis of that summary. And for us, just an example, Speak AI, we work with a lot of teams doing interviews and focus groups. So you want to be able to say, hey, let's remove the moderator, or at least we have the moderator labeled. I want to know specifically how the meeting respondents are answering this question. And so with speaker identification, with the filtering within Speak, that's very possible and allows you to analyze with high fidelity and granularity that OpenAI, at least in its current instance with ChatGPT Record, is not allowing you to do. Minimal team and role controls, especially with meetings, which are so sensitive and important, and you need segregation between different types of meeting and different departments, and a lot of mix-ups and problems can come in here that I'm sure OpenAI is an experience that we've had to go through over 6+ years. And then no dedicated repository, which is something we've spent a lot of time here on at Speak AI. Being able to create folders that can be shared with clients or team members, or you can just use the in-app to analyze, summarize, interact with audio, video from months, years ago, depending on how long you've used our system, which is a super valuable thing and is not possible within the current edition of OpenAI's ChatGPT Record. Either way, I do think that this is a powerful addition from OpenAI, and it really brings out this risk that a lot of companies are facing right now, this nervousness about how they feel about their roadmap and their market and the position that they're in. And to me, what this shows is that OpenAI is the new Google, in the fact that Google had that period where they were streaming so much information through the search results and can understand what customers want, what consumers want, be able to predict what to build next. OpenAI is now in that moment with their system reaching so many users and people pumping in information and personalized queries and personalized conversations in a way that no other system has ever seen. And so the moat that they are building has been, I would say, under indexed, because it is truly a powerful thing. And we're seeing those network effects take hold now as so many people use the platform. They have the ability to mine these conversations for insights. They can also inspect the market, see what use cases are getting the most traction, which companies that are embedding the OpenAI models through the APIs are having the most traction and having the most success. We've seen the subset of meeting assistants and note takers. We've seen the subset of code development with Cursor and Windsurf, and they went and bought Windsurf for billions of dollars. That usage pattern, that usage spike, that growth, they can all combine that together to prioritize their next releases in a way that is pretty damn incredible and powerful right now. So what do? You go vertical, you go very deep into that vertical. You look for that blue ocean, maybe you swim into the future like Otter AI, and you look at avatars, and even that might only be a temporary blue ocean. While OpenAI comes with their own weapons and voice recognition and text to speech and AI avatars. And then you've got other companies, 11 Labs and Anthropic, doing incredible things here too. Google, with Google Veo, it's mind-blowing. Maybe you can try to scale up and be more aggressive, but that value proposition might not be as tight right now, and OpenAI's ChatGPT Record mode might be good enough. Or if you're in a different industry or sector, you might start to see some of their functionalities encroach on that space and be good enough, because it's all combined, because all of those knowledge connectors and platform connectors. Maybe you give up. I'm seeing tech people move into hardware, tech people move into businesses that are service-based, because they're seeing some writing on the wall and wondering about the diminishing returns that are taking place right now. And we're not just seeing this in software. We've got Figure here doing these like mundane tasks that a factory worker would do 60 minutes straight, no break, no complaints. And so even those spaces are being encroached on, I think, even quicker than we thought. And it's crazy how quickly it's gone, because just a little bit ago, people were taking transcripts from platforms like ours or recording notes and taking that transcript and pasting it into ChatGPT. They saw that trend, and then they built the functionality native in itself. So things can change very quickly, no matter who you are, what market you're operating in. And you need to be on it. You need to be adaptable. You need to be focused. You need to be precise if you want to compete against OpenAI the new Google. And I remember when I first started Speak AI, I would talk about what we were doing, and every person would ask me, hey, what if Google does this? And now it's, what if OpenAI does this? What a time to be alive. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Bye-bye.